All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be volume 2 in the series that I've recently started called Are You in a Toxic Relationship? Now, volume 1 featured Mr. Reuben Foster and his quote-unquote on-again, off-again girlfriend. Volume 2 will feature Mr. Ray Rice, the former star running back of the Baltimore Ravens, and his current wife, Janay Rice. As we all know, back in 2014, the tumultuous relationship between Mr. Ray Rice and his current wife, Miss Janay Rice, or Mrs. Janay Rice, let me correct myself, at least for now, she's Mrs. Janay Rice. It came to a boil when they decided that they were going to engage in mutual combat in a casino in New Jersey. If you personally ask me, was that their first time engaging in mutual combat or a bubbling over of their toxic relationship? No, it was not, even though they both claimed that it was. It is what it is. We all know that the media used that event to try to socially engineer the NFL. And even before the current quote-unquote Me Too movement, that event was really the tipping point for what we see today in relation to how domestic disputes are covered in sports, particularly in the NFL. And for those of you brothers who pay attention, 95 to 98% of the time that you see a domestic violence disturbance or a domestic dispute get covered on ESPN or Fox Sports 1, but mostly ESPN because ESPN is far more woke than Fox Sports 1 is. But whenever we see a domestic disturbance get covered on any major news network, it's normally going to revolve around a so-called black man and a black woman. Because it's the so-called black man who has to be the face of oppression, misogyny, and maltreatment of the woman. Because once again, they're always trying to cause that fissure between the so-called black man and the so-called black woman. And the purpose of that is to isolate the so-called black man. And as I tell you brothers all the time, this society is not so much about black versus white, at least not in 2019. It's more about so-called black man against everybody else. Now, of course, there are different rivalries and different issues amongst the various demographics. Even just within the so-called black community or so-called black race, you have light skin versus dark skin, black American versus black Caribbean. But in all actuality, the main battle that is being orchestrated is so-called black man versus everybody, and they want the so-called black man to be the face of domestic violence. And Ray Rice was the person who they decided to cast as the poster boy for how they were going to recalibrate the understanding of relationships and what the woman would be allowed to do, would be allowed to instigate, and how she would not be held accountable for her part to play in any form of tumult between the man and the woman. And whenever there's a recalibration in society, whenever there's a form of social engineering afoot, we as so-called black men have to be aware of it so that we can roll with the punches, so that we can adapt to what is going on. Because really, so-called black men, what they're telling you is that you have to take your time with these women. You have to really search them out. And while you're doing that, we have to be searching within ourselves as well to make sure that we're as on point as we need to be. Ray Rice is going to illustrate very richly in this interview that he was not on point at all. And he's going to bring forth many talking points and concepts that I've touched on intermittently on this channel, particularly pertaining to the normalization of dysfunctionality that is so pervasive in the so-called black community. Of course, they sat down with Miss Gayle King, the 65-year-old bald-headed wig-wearing man-hater herself. So we know that she was going to use Ray Rice as a springboard for many of her more feminazi ideologies. And that's fine because that will give us certain talking points as well. So, of course, they're going to talk about it and I'm going to chime in.
When hotel security video surfaced last month showing Kansas City Chiefs running back Kareem Hunt in a physical fight with a woman, it reminded many people of another incident involving an NFL player nearly 5 years ago. You may remember in February 2014, Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice was seen dragging his unconscious fiancée out of an elevator.
Yes, they engaged in mutual combat and she lost. Brothers, I'm on record as saying this numerous times on my channel. Is it okay to put your hands on a woman? No, it is not. But if you're put in a position where you have to defend yourself, you have to do what you have to do. The point being is this, that when you establish a serious relationship with a female, you should already know whether or not she's cantankerous or belligerent or bellicose in some way. Some of you guys like that type of chick. And then you end up asked out. You end up having to go to jail or even to prison. Because some of these females are so rabid in their fervor to go against men that you're put in the position where you damn near have to kill somebody in self-defense. Or maybe you're the malicious one yourself and you just like all that action with a woman. Either way, Is it okay to be going back and forth with the female with that level of vitriol? No, it is not. No, it is not. And the point of a real man with wisdom is to try to approach a level of placidity, peace in your life. Everybody in your life is supposed to be there to bring peace and quiet and harmony to your life. And if the woman cannot do that, she has to go. The point being is this. Anybody who's seen the footage of this altercation knows it started way before the elevator. They were hitting one another. She actually spit on him. He spit on her. And to be quite honest with you, when I saw all that, there's no way that you're going to tell me that this is the first time that they've engaged in anything this poisonous and toxic.
A second video revealed later showed that Rice had punched her and knocked her out in the elevator. His team
Well, there were many other videos that show her spitting on him and hitting him. So it is what it is. Once again, brothers, this series is always going to be on how to avoid the dumb shit. So-called black men are raised from boyhood to believe that it's okay to argue and fight and fuss, and it's okay for a woman to get up in your face and curse and carry on, and that's a part of relationships. No, it is not. No, it is not. The modern day liberal black female is almost like a dog out of a cage. They're allowed to bark and bite and things of that nature, and so-called black men are just supposed to tolerate it, and no, you're not. The job of the woman is to make you happy. If she's not there to make you happy, she has to go. And us as men, we have to let go of a lot of that feminine nature of trying to go back and forth with the woman. These are things that have been taught to the so-called black man, so-called black male, in a lot of these single mother households. And that has to go. That's why I make these videos about the so-called black man protecting his seed. Before you inseminate a woman, can she accept the masculine principle? Can she live with a man? These are things that take many, many years to be able to discern so that we can avoid silly shit like this.
Team dropped him and he has not played professional football since. Rice and his fiancée, her name is Janay, married just weeks after the incident, and they...
Notice they married weeks after the incident. I'm going to delve into this a little bit more as the video goes along. But it's very obvious to me that that was convenient for the both of them. Ray Rice had to marry her for the sake of his image, to show that he could redeem his quote-unquote mistake or misstep. And she needed to marry him because she'd already put in years with him. And I'm sure that he by far is the richest guy that she knows, because she most likely came from a home that may have been stable, may not have been that stable. But what are the chances that she's going to meet another person who probably has 7 figures in the bank?
And they now have 2 children. In an interview you'll see only on CBS This Morning, we spoke to Ray and Janay Rice at their Connecticut home last week. We learned how they're making their marriage work and why they stayed together, and how the cream hunt video has affected their lives. So I'm wondering what you thought when you first saw the cream hunt tape.
Well, obviously, you look back and you see their similarities. I knew that our name was going to get brought up in the conversation.
Brothers, once again, there's no woman who's worth you laying your hands on her and you're the one who initiated the physical altercation. If you have to defend yourself, you have to defend yourself. But even with that, you have to be very, very careful. Because with most of you guys who end up in situations where the woman is attacking you, she's already showed signs that she's mentally unstable and emotionally fragile to the point where she wants to enact her emotional fragility by getting violent with you. Maybe you represent the father who wasn't there. Maybe you represent the male cousin or uncle who molested her. Maybe you represent the boyfriend from high school who may have raped her or may have left her high and dry for somebody else. A lot of these women have a lot of baggage, man. You have to understand the baggage. A lot of them want you to carry the baggage. It's up to you whether or not you want to carry a woman's baggage. But at the very least, you have to open up some of them suitcases and check out what's inside for your own benefit.
I do think people certainly see you as a poster boy for domestic violence caught in a very graphic way on tape.
Well, we know that's what he is. We know that Ray Rice is the poster boy. But you know what's so funny? Ray Rice is the poster boy for domestic violence. But Josh Brown, the former punter of the New York Giants, his wife is on record as stating that the man beat the shit out of her at least 30, 40 times. And it took so long for them to move him out of the NFL. Why is that? Because once again, black man, they want you to be the face of domestic violence. They're going to use you as the lab rat for this social engineering endeavor to totally change the paradigm of male-female relations in America. And they know already that you're viewed with so much disrespect by everybody, including your own woman, that nobody's going to care if you're the poster boy for something bad. Most of these so-called black women, they want to see the so-called black man as the poster boy for everything bad because they're upset with the so-called black man that he's not a black version of the white man. See, in this society, everything has been turned upside down and inside out. So that's why it's so important for the so-called black man to put the Most High first and not put his faith in the woman, because the woman and anything in the flesh can be gone tomorrow.
And how do you feel about that?
Early on, you could feel like, oh, why they keep bringing my name up? You can make excuses, or you can actually do the hard work.
I've heard you say that there are many underlying things, and as you've had time to reflect and really do a deep dive for both of you,
Yes.
what was the answer you came up for yourself about the underlying issue?
Now, brothers, pay very close attention to how Ray Rice answers this question, because as I've already stated, I've touched on this in numerous videos for well over a year now. They try to normalize dysfunctionality to the so-called black man. He's imbued with a misunderstanding of what life is supposed to be about from his childhood. Ray Rice is going to put this forth right now. Let me rewind this back just a little bit.
Issue.
Oh, why they keep bringing my name up? You can make excuses, or you can actually do the hard work.
I've heard you say that there are many underlying things, and as you've had time to reflect and really do a deep dive for both of you,
Yes.
what was the answer you came up for yourself about the underlying issues?
One of the underlying issues for me was I never wanted to ask for help. Football for me was my counseling. It was my therapy. It was my psychologist. It was everything.
Did you see domestic abuse in your own home when you were growing up?
It was more of my mom going through, a bad relationship. That's when I started to realize I was normalizing abnormal things.
Brothers, you hear that? Now, didn't I just state that a few videos back in regards to what the so-called black man is raised around, his environment, the atmosphere that he's immersed in from his childhood? When he sees his mother, first off, dating numerous men, as opposed to being raised in an environment where, at the very least, there should be a father and mother in the household. But if there's not, the mother and the father should be cognizant of the formative years of the child, so that they make sure that there's a certain level of a bubble around their child when it comes to the household. The household has to be a safe zone. It can't be a zone where different men are being brought in and out. Because I always state this, if you want to understand certain components of human behavior, when we evaluate and examine the animal kingdom, for example, a lion, when he wants to take over the pride of another lion, the first thing that he will do is kill the children, the cubs of that former male, because he wants his own bloodline to flourish. That's what's known as infanticide. The incumbent male lion, if he's able to defeat the current ruling line of that pride, once he kills that lion or drives him off, not only will he kill the cubs, oftentimes he'll eat those cubs, because that represents the full conquering of that former male. Now, I'm the incumbent ruler. Now you have to follow what I say. Now I get to inseminate all the women and make my bloodline flourish. Many of these modern day liberal females do not understand that when you take that praying mantis approach, remember the female praying mantis, she has sex with the male and then kills him, because she gives birth to the children, so on and so forth. The modern day woman, not just the black woman, but the modern day woman in Western civilization, they adhere to that principle to a degree. Once they're impregnated, they understand that basically the man is attached to them by a tethered string. So she can bring him close or let him fall by the wayside. It's all up to her whims. But now she has that connection through the child or through the marriage contract. So there are a lot of dynamics to relationships in this society that brothers have to be aware of. But the main thing is, you never ever normalize dysfunctionality. The woman by nature is not a creature of propriety or balance per se. She's more a creature of her whims, very capricious. I say this all the time. She goes according to her sensations. It's very difficult for her to understand the repercussions of her actions. So they're more into what's making me feel good at the moment. Is every woman like that? No. But the vast majority of them are. And they have no idea how they can damage their children or their household when they bring in many of these random dudes. Now you're opening your child up to understand that the man in the home is replaceable. That's what's being told to the child subconsciously. These are all tenets that the so-called black woman learned from the feminist white woman. Even though the modern day so-called strong black woman tries to act like she's an independent thinker, she gets the vast majority of her thoughts from the liberal feminazi white woman. Those are just facts. But once again, I'm going to rewind this back just a little bit once again.
Football for me was my counseling. It was my therapy. It was my psychologist.
It's very obvious that Ray Rice grew up in a very, very fractured home. So he needed football. Once again, football has male coaches, so he has male authority figures. It also provided him with structure and order that he probably was not getting in the household. All he claims is that he saw his mother going through bad relationships, as he calls it. He does not admit that he saw her be subjected to violence. But many of these women, unfortunately, they feed off of violence. They feed off of the back and forth with random men, with new men. And once the process wears out, they go and get another one. And it happens over and over and over again. That's why I state the man is supposed to be a force of order. The woman is chaotic by nature. The man brings order. They fit together. The man is supposed to put the woman in line. I know a lot of people might not like that phrase, but it is what it is. The woman brings nurturing. She brings support for the man. She brings love for the children. I say this all the time. If you guys who work in corporate America pay attention, you'll always notice that all these so-called single mothers, the screensaver on their computer will always be them with their child. Very rarely will it include a grown man. That's because they're living through that mother goddess archetype. So brothers have to understand the various levels to what's going on in this society today and how there are reverberations that trickle down to your children. So the only thing that we could change is ourselves. We can't change the woman. The woman will be forced to change when she sees that our conduct towards her has changed. When you stop being enraptured and enchanted by the woman just because of her looks or her body type. Why do you think all these women dress like sluts? Because they know that for the most part, they have no wife quality. So they have to put forth the whore quality. They have to put forth the whore archetype to bring you in. They can't say I'm going to be supportive and loyal and all that other stuff because that's not intrinsic in their nature anymore. So they have to reel you in with some frivolous bullshit. So it's up to you to be strong enough to understand what a woman is supposed to bring to your table and to know the difference between a wife and a harlot, a wife and a concubine. All right. A concubine is here for momentary pleasure. They can come and go. The wife is always going to be around because she represents a lot more than just sex and carnality.
It was everything.
Did you see domestic abuse in your own home when you were growing up?
It was more of my mom going through, a bad relationship.
What that did was that encoded in his mind that it's okay to argue, to throw dishes back and forth, to curse people out. All the shit that goes on in so many of these so-called black relationships today. I'm sure people will say, well, that goes on in other races. I'm not concerned with that. My channel is a pro-truth channel geared towards the so-called black man. That's what my channel is geared towards. Right now, the so-called black man is at the very, very bottom of the totem pole, if he's on the totem pole at all. That's what we need to focus on.
That's when I started to realize I was normalizing abnormal things.
That's a great breakthrough for him because a lot of brothers never realize that.
I was a man at 11, and then at 21, I got drafted and became a boy.
And that was a revelation to you.
Now, did you brothers hear what he said? He said he was a man at a certain age, then he got drafted and became a boy. So in other words, once he got drafted, he no longer had any real responsibilities. He was not held accountable for his actions. So he moved into a false sense of reality where he thought he can get away with anything. And there are a lot of athletes who are in the professional field, whether it be baseball, football, basketball, who suffer from that same issue.
To you about there are many different kinds of abuse. Is that what you're saying to us?
Yes. That's
and how to process that?
Yes. We didn't have...
Well, we know there's a lot of different types of abuse. There's not just physical abuse. There's also verbal abuse. There's mental abuse. But they don't highlight the mental and verbal abuse aspect because, once again, they want the female in this society to think that whatever she says is okay. Remember, Stephen A. Smith got suspended from ESPN because he said women also have to understand that they should not be saying things to provoke altercations with men. He got suspended for 2 weeks off that statement. And we all know that there are things that women purposely say to men to try to set them off.
We didn't have a physical abuse problem, but I can say there were different forms of abuse that took place. Was it emotional, financial? You get to the physical, and that's obviously, like, if it's one time, it's still one time too many.
Let me say this, brothers, once again, I have a hard time believing that that was their first physical dust up. If that's what they both say, then that's what it is. If that was their first physical dust up, there must have been so much antipathy between them two built up that when it finally came out, for you to spit on another person like they were spitting on one another, that shows a total lack of respect for each other's humanity. So what that shows me is that they were very abusive to one another for a very long period of time. For a very long period of time before all of that manifested itself, if what he says is true.
I'm curious, Janay, did you think that you were in an abusive relationship, knowing what he just said, that there are many different forms of abuse?
Now listen to how she answers, how she responds to this question.
Abuse.
No, honestly.
You did not.
I just thought we were being a typical, boyfriend and girlfriend. Like, we argue and...
Now, brothers, did you just hear what she stated? She also pretty much reiterated what Ray Rice said about how she thought that there was nothing wrong with their relationship because she thought that they were the quote-unquote average boyfriend and girlfriend. What does that mean? That means that many of these young females today are being taught that what a boyfriend is an argument partner. I stated this in a previous video. The very, very lowest level of even a borderline functional relationship with a woman, the fuck to fight ratio should be at the very, very least 10-1. Really, the woman should not be arguing with you at all if you're on point as a man. She shouldn't be arguing with you at all because the communication level has to be there to where you guys can exchange ideas or exchange certain understandings and it not become contemptuous or what have you. But at the end of the day, you guys are going to have disagreements here and there. But if you handle your business as a man, she's supposed to understand her place. If she can't understand her place, she has to go. But this notion in modern day relationships that it's a natural part of a relationship that people are going to argue, that means that many women are looking forward to that. I'm going to say it again. Many modern day women believe that all a boyfriend is an argument partner. A lot of these women are looking for somebody to argue with because they have so much negative energy inside. They have to express it. They need somebody to express their negativity with. And if you subscribe to that understanding of a relationship, you're going to end up like Ray Rice. You're going to end up an argument partner, and eventually you're going to end up a fist fight partner.